Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Davis, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager for Fear Free. Thank you for joining us for Caring for Caregivers, the 3 areas crucial to mental well-being, brought to you by Virox Animal Health, makers of Rescue. Presenting today will be Dr. Natalie Marks. Dr. Marks obtained her bachelor's degree with high honors in animal science from the University of Illinois in 1998, and then proceeded to obtain a master's in veterinary medicine and doctorate of veterinary medicine degree with high honors from the University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine. She also led her practice to become the 7th nationally and first practice in Illinois to become a fear-free certified practice. Some housekeeping before we begin. There should be 2 options on your Zoom controls. That is a chat feature and a Q&A feature. We will have time at the end to address questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A box so we don't lose it in the open audience chat. If you feel more comfortable asking your question directly to Dr. Marks, she will provide her email address at the end of the presentation. We're so excited to have Dr. Marks here with us today. So on that note, Dr. Marks, take it away.
Thanks, Jessica. And thanks to everyone who is on tonight. It's good to be back with a lot of you. If this is your repeat time with the Fear Free webinar series, I've been on several times. If it's your first time, welcome. Tonight is going to be a little different. So normally when I present and my colleagues present, we're teaching more medical, right? So physical and emotional health strategies, tips, tricks, processes, pharmaceutical interventions with PVPs, all kinds of handling, things that are part of what we do on our job that are helping our patients and clients. Tonight, though, this is all about you. So it's going to be potentially a little vulnerable. It may be a little uncomfortable. It may be something you're definitely not used to. And I will say this is something I've worked at now for many years, of being able to sort of talk in this space and help others perhaps acknowledge within themselves or in peers or colleagues or family or friends when these areas that are really destructive to our mental well-being are happening. So I want to first of all, as Jessica said, thank very much Virox, the makers of Rescue, for supporting and sponsoring this presentation and for really believing in the need for our profession to have this mental health support. And again, acknowledgement that this is a challenging profession and we have had our most challenging year behind us. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all of the work that you've done through your career, but most importantly through this pandemic, as I have been on the front lines with you. But I most importantly want to thank you for choosing this hour tonight, because that says you choose you. And that's a really hard thing to do as veterinarians, right? Because we're typically not selfish people. We're typically very giving people, almost to a fault. And this is hard, to put yourself first. Many of us are parents. Obviously, that's really challenging to do. Many of us are overly giving to our clients at times, of course, definitely very giving to our patients, to our colleagues, to friends and neighbors and other colleagues at schools or wherever you spend your social time. So please make this hour worth it. So put your phone away, lock the door if you need to, put on a movie for your kids. If you're at the practice, put your phone on Do Not Disturb. This is time that you chose for you, so let's make the most of it together. It's going to be difficult for me to get into that chat tonight as I'm presenting, but please feel free to comment, share, whatever you feel comfortable doing. I'm going to ask you to kind of self-reflect. If you want to share what you're thinking about, please do. If you don't, that's totally cool too. I'm going to provide some personal insight into my own life. You don't have to, but if you want to, I welcome it. And I'll leave my contact information afterwards, so that if you want to contact me personally, I'm very much here to be a resource for you wherever you are in your journey. So if this is your first time thinking about your well-being, and you've been feeling okay, and you're doing this proactively, I applaud you. I wish I would have done this 20 years ago. However, if you're really struggling, like many of us are during this very challenging time, and you're needing some support, I want to stress to you, it is okay to not be okay. And I've written several columns about this lately in the magazines and journals I write for. It is absolutely okay to not be okay. And that's why we're here tonight. So I wanted to share 2 reasons of why this is important to me, why I chose to take time for my self-care. The first you're looking at are my 3 kids, Sophia and Evan and Maddie. The youngest wants to be a veterinarian, and I want to be able to authentically and truthfully tell her that that's a great choice, right? That's what we want to do. And I still do that. But I hear many colleagues around the country saying, and I see posts about this on Facebook, I don't know if I'd tell my own kids to be a veterinarian or a veterinary nurse anymore. That's really sad. And obviously lots of personal reasons for that. But most importantly, I want all of you to kind of think right now, why did you choose tonight? Is it your kids? Is it your heart pet? This is my heart dog, Samantha, who I can literally not live without. Is it your partner? Is it, what are you doing this for? What I want you to think about though is, and part of what should be on that picture is you're doing it for you, that you want to be in your best mental place because we have a really hard job. So much of our time at work, I feel like we're fencing, right? We're fighting this person on the other end of the phone, or we have someone coming at us with a bad online review, or someone's emailing something and you haven't even met the client, right? Unfortunately, this is where a lot of us are ending up, right? Feeling cynical, bitter, defensive, tired, always on the attack, right? We feel that way when we are dealing with the stages of compassion fatigue. And we're going to get to that in a little bit. But one thing I'm also seeing within the profession, and I know several colleagues have spoken out very vocally about this, Eric Garcia being one of them, is unfortunately this coming and being recognized from colleague to colleague, that we're not being supportive of each other, that we're criticizing each other in the space of significant stress. And instead, I want us to think of this. I want us to think of empathy and support for one another, because we're all coming from different spots. Some of us may have lost a family member to COVID. Some of us may have lost a home, may have lost a job, may be dealing with family members with mental illness, may have lost a child, may be caring chronically for a terminally ill family member, may be struggling with debt, may be struggling with postpartum depression. There are so many things behind the scenes that we don't know. And instead of being the one to lash out, let's instead reach out, because we all need that right now. So I want to talk a little bit about the 3 areas of compassion: compassion satisfaction, compassion stress, and compassion fatigue. And where we all want to live as veterinarians and veterinary nurses is in this area of compassion satisfaction. I think that's the, pie in the sky dream of what we would all get in our profession, that pleasure and satisfying feeling that comes from helping others. And I can look back on my life as a veterinarian in the last almost 20 years, and I have, endless moments that I treasure of having compassion satisfaction. And I'm sure all of you, as you reflect back, can find the same. Hopefully some of you had that even today before you jumped on this webinar. There's lots of professions that have the hope and the dream of continuous compassion satisfaction. Public service, so police, paramedic, firefighters, certainly medical professions do of all kinds. Therapists, psychiatrists, social workers, those dealing with mental health, and obviously us, right? I think we are probably very, very high, if not first on the list of those within careers that really strive within every patient to have compassion satisfaction, not just for the patient, but also for the client. Because that's the good stuff, right? That's the stuff that refuels us and recharges us. Those are those cases that you come home and you feel rewarded and you share with your family, or you post a great picture on Facebook or Instagram, or you're in a DVM moms group and you share it and you get tons and tons of engagement, supporting your great work. That's also a way to where we spread encouragement. We did something great. We feel mentally great, and we're able to encourage others to hopefully feel the same. That can be incredibly powerful within a practice, especially in team members who feel overlooked, don't have empowerment. They feel just sort of underappreciated. We often see that within the veterinary technician, veterinary nurse space. And this is a way, when you are feeling compassion satisfaction, to again spread encouragement and joy to have others feel that as well. Part of having continuous compassion satisfaction is to understand that there are actually what are considered laws, but I'm going to just call them guidelines that govern healthy caregiving. So again, we're in that caregivers group, an umbrella. There are ways that help us stay in that space, sustaining our compassion. We need to practice that authentic, sustainable self-care every day. We don't want to call that selfish time, right? That is essential time to our mental health. Having a strong support system around you, finding that work-life balance, right? That holy grail that feels almost impossible today. Applying empathetic discernment, right? And we're going to talk about how to protect your empathy in a little bit. Recognizing humor. Lord knows there are plenty of humorous moments in our day. God, I could write a book. But remembering those, recognizing them, and letting yourself laugh. Learning how to let go, something I struggle with, and I know many of you do as well. And then acknowledging your success. Humility is wonderful, but it only goes so far, and you don't need to practice it every moment of your day. Remaining optimistic, and again, elevating that level of compassion satisfaction. We'll talk about this group in a little bit more later, but the Compassion Fatigue Awareness Project was formed in 2013. Was really started within the human medical profession, but very, very, very applicable to our industry as well. And if you go to compassionfatigue.org, and again, feel free to screenshot any of these resources, lots of great tidbits in very bite-sized portions to help you understand compassion fatigue and how to acknowledge, be aware of that within yourself and others. When we let compassion satisfaction dwindle, or as we'll see, we have other influencers that are negative on that compassion satisfaction, we start to unfortunately develop compassion stress. This could have been a picture of me, I think, many times in my career. And I wonder if any of you, I wish I could see you, but I wonder if any of you are sort of shaking your head or acknowledging and kind of, I've been there feeling, because this is a position I've been in many times after a euthanasia, or after a financial, really tough discussion, or after a very emotional client. We've been there, right? This is very familiar. And that's compassion stress, because these are the unavoidable stresses that we experience when we are empathetic and helping others in distress. And many psychiatrists and psychologists feel that this is actually expected and very natural in the healthcare field. But compassion stress, when we are feeling that, we are on the fence or on that precipice of the cliff, because we can either acknowledge it and work to steer back towards compassion satisfaction, figure out what is causing them to be stressors and resolve those and work on coping strategies. Or what ends up happening many times is that compassion stress repeats itself over and over and over and escalates to compassion fatigue. And this is kind of what our our tree essentially looks like when we're talking about having that professional quality of life. We, of course, want to be on the compassion satisfaction side, where we can really take joy and pride and share our experiences to encourage others to reach those same goals. Unfortunately, what ends up happening a lot, and I really want this to be something that you truly think about tonight and not be afraid to acknowledge, even if it's just to yourself. It is okay if you feel you are at that point. If you feel, as we talk about kind of the descriptors of compassion fatigue, if you are at that point, we have support for you. Burnout and secondary trauma go down that tree further. They go deeper. It's harder to come back from that. And we're trying to avoid that. So I want to really look at compassion fatigue tonight and honestly admit to you, I have been here. I have been here twice in my career. One after not having treatment for postpartum depression with my first child, and one, unfortunately, during a very difficult time dealing with a family member with mental health issues. So I've been here, and this is also known as vicarious stress or secondary traumatic stress. It's stress that results from the traumatized individual, not the trauma itself. And this quote by Rumi is very near and dear to my heart, because this is what I used to do. Don't give from the depths of your well, but from your overflow. I used to give and give and give, and then I would feel empty, but I'd somehow try to give more. And then I'd feel even emptier, and I'd try to give more. And I was doing it all wrong, because instead I should have been filling my well with support and self-care and other positive steps in the right direction, so that I did have things to give and I did have overflow to share. But this is the stress that results from helping or wanting to help people who are experiencing trauma or suffering. And every time we're dealing with a family with a cancer patient, every time we're going through a traumatic euthanasia, every time we're going through financial struggles where they have to make medical decisions pet parents don't want to make. These are all points in which we're helping people who are experiencing trauma or suffering. And that burden, unfortunately, goes to us. There are a lot of risk factors for compassion fatigue. And I would argue that veterinarians and veterinary nurses, we have all five. Degree of exposure. For many of us, this is almost every day, right? We're dealing with these individuals who are dealing with trauma or suffering. Many of us have a personal history of trauma, right? Because we're empathetic souls who are givers and caregivers to family, friends, neighbors, pets, and we've had trauma potentially in our life. We have incredibly high degrees of empathy. I think that's just period, right? We have countertransference. This I'm incredibly guilty of, taking a client's or a pet parent's emotional burden and taking it on ourselves to try to help them. Of course, in theory, the goal is wonderful in that we're trying to do everything we can to support. What it's not doing is preserving our own mental health and emotional health, because many of us wear our hearts on, well, in this case, it's the person's chest, but we wear it on our sleeves, right? We're emotional people. And we're for most of us, very inexperienced working with trauma. When I was in veterinary school, we had zero, literally not even 5 minutes of help going through counseling for euthanasia. How do you handle a euthanasia? I remember my first euthanasia right when I got out of school, and it was a very, very old Labrador retriever who could barely walk, with a very, very emotional older woman who was his mom. And she really needed support. And I froze because I wanted to run up and hug her. That was my natural response. I didn't know, as a young veterinarian, is that appropriate? Do we do that kind of physical support? Can I cry? Is it okay to cry? What's the best thing to say in this moment? And how do I process this? How can I go from this euthanasia and in 5 minutes suddenly change how I'm feeling compartmentalize it or box it off and go into a new puppy exam with a family who's ecstatic. How do you do that? Right? I didn't learn that. And instead, I learned by lived experience, whether it was right or wrong, and certainly by learning CE along the way. But that very first euthanasia was traumatizing. And so we don't have that experience to work with trauma. And I'm sure as you take this time, again, to really focus on yourself, you probably are going through this checklist and thinking, wow, I'm at risk for this, right? I have felt these points. I have been in these shoes. And this is something I need to be aware of. Now, Dr. Elizabeth Strand, who is the Associate Clinical Professor and Founding Director of Veterinary Social Work at the College of Veterinary Medicine at University of Tennessee, brilliant, insightful woman, has recently said that research shows that veterinarians face ethical dilemmas 3 to 5 times per week. And such moral stress is a primary contributor to compassion fatigue. And I would have to say, I think she's right. Like, how many times do we get into discussions of, is it the right time? I don't know how much I want to spend. I don't know if I should be playing God. I can't keep this dog anymore or this cat anymore. I want to give it up to a shelter. I just don't like him anymore. Statements that we hear from clients that we suddenly have to kind of figure out, right? And make decisions and find places that seem okay for both parties, even though, again, we are fairly inexperienced as a profession as what are bioethics and how do they guide how we practice? You know, even the saint of all saints, right? Some would argue the most giving, selfless woman who has ever walked the face of the earth, even Mother Teresa, wrote in her plan to her superiors, it was mandatory for her nuns to take an entire year off from their duties every 4 to 5 years to allow them to heal from the effects of their caregiving work. I read this and I put this in here because can you imagine if every 4 to 5 years we walked in and said to a practice owner or a manager or a lead or medical director and said, you know, I'm at my 4 to 5 years. I think I need a year off to heal. I chuckle about that because it seems so completely, you know, it's just complete fantasy. But think about that. What if we did? What if we could take sabbaticals and take time off and truly heal? What would our profession look like? I think it's a really interesting thought. And certainly when we think about right now how busy our profession is, it seems completely unreasonable. But I wonder what it would be like. Because this is the compassion fatigue process. So if you start over on the left, we have this empathetic ability in this diamond. And that, without outside variables, creates this empathetic response, that what creates that compassion satisfaction. We know that there's concern and exposure to suffering, of course, that adds pressure onto that empathetic response. And we can get a sense of satisfaction and sometimes have some ability to detach so that we don't get so wrapped up and involved into, you know, these sort of negative stressors. But over time, we can get this residual compassion stress, what I was referring to, where instead of it being a satisfactory feeling, we start to feel more run down and empty. And then with prolonged exposure to suffering and traumatic memories, especially if you're dealing with things that have hit you personally, we end up with other life demands stressing us to the max and then ending up with that compassion fatigue. And this is a very, very studied phenomenon. Figley diagrammed this journal originally in 2001. But this is something, again, like I said, all of these professions that deal with compassion satisfaction have the risk of shifting down and becoming. There are 4 categories of clinical signs that we see with compassion fatigue: emotional signs, cognitive signs, physical signs, and behavioral signs. Now, I can't capture every single one tonight. There are lists and lists and lists and lists and lists. of different things, but I've highlighted in here the big ones that apply to us. And I want you, again, because I hope your phone is still off and your door is locked and your office is on do not disturb and you are focused on this. I want you to really reflect and think about your life and see if any of these you can acknowledge are happening for you. Because that is the hardest step, is to say, you know what, that is me. Emotionally, people with compassion fatigue feel overwhelmed and hopeless. They can vary from being incredibly angry and irritable all the way to sadness. So there's no right or wrong there. There's absolutely anxiety and reduced empathy and hypersensitivity or insensitivity. You can be incredibly quick to react and defensive, or the exact opposite. I'll tell you the second time that I really acknowledged I had compassion fatigue. My daughter was in school and they were making a Mother's Day project. And if you're a parent, I'm sure you can remember, or at least, kind of roll with me here. You get these art projects about, my mommy or my daddy is blank and I want to be blank, or the best thing about my mommy is blank. And they're super cute when they're in preschool. And as they get older, they become a little more honest. And my second grader at the time did one for Mother's Day, and it was, my mommy's a veterinarian and she helps doggies and kitties and blah, blah, blah. And then, I wish my mommy would. And she said, smile more. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I was carrying all of this when I came home. And for the parents out there, as you know, we see our children much more infrequently than we probably would like to. So for those moments, for her to recognize that I wasn't smiling, I was sad. It actually was a life-saving wake-up call for me to read that and to get that on Mother's Day and to say, you know what, I'm worth more than this. Cognitively, there's constant thinking about that suffering, constant focus on the euthanasia, on the stress of the clients, the patients, your practice, whatever that is. Constant self-blame. I'm not good enough. I didn't do this right. I should have done this. I feel guilty about this. All of those really negative, very scary thoughts. A change in belief system. You used to completely be spiritual. Now you don't care anymore. You used to be fanatical about taking care of yourself and exercising, and you haven't worked out in weeks. Those kind of things. Changing in just your value system, right? In what you believe is morally and ethically correct, and then suddenly going back on that. Having that reduced sense of accomplishment, even in things that if you rationally were in a good space, you'd feel very proud of, you don't. And then difficulty concentrating and focusing. Physically, if you have compassion fatigue, you may be feeling nauseous, dizzy, having headaches. We know that in our patients, there's a significant gut-brain axis, right? And we know that even things like fortiflora, right, have been developed because we know that the gut feeds the brain, and we can reduce anxiety if we have a healthy gut. We know that having nausea, GI signs, difficulty sleeping, tense, agitated mood, even nightmares can all manifest because of the trauma and anxiety surrounding compassion fatigue. And then behaviorally, are you feeling isolated? Are you withdrawing from friends and family? Are you self-medicating, using substances that aren't legal, overusing substances that are? Are you choosing to drink and smoke now and you never did before? Are you having a hard time stopping at one wine glass a week? All of those things. Relationship conflicts. Are you struggling with your partner? Are you struggling with your kids? Are you struggling with your parents or your siblings? Anyone who has an importance and priority of relationship in your life, are you having conflict with that? Have people noticed you're less efficient at the office? And are you not having pleasure in activities that you used to find pleasure in? Hobbies, travel, exercising, spending time with friends, whatever that is it hard for you to enjoy that? Again, these are all hard things to be honest about. It's one thing to just kind of be half listening tonight. If you are, I've been there. You have good intention, but it's hard to look at yourself sometimes. It's hard to really be honest about not being okay, especially if you normally look like you're doing okay. And I think that was the hardest thing for me. Owning a practice, managing a team of 63 team members, at the same time being a working mom of 3 young kids, a spouse, a daughter, a sister, a neighbor, a volunteer at school, all of those things that I was juggling and hats that I continue to juggle, and showing that I was okay on the outside takes a lot of energy, a lot of physical and mental endurance, right? To put on that happy face. It is hard to acknowledge, but I'm telling you, it is the first step. If you are at that place, it is the first step to feeling better. Now, a lot of people ask, is compassion fatigue interchangeable with burnout? And I think it's really important to understand that they are similar, but not the same thing. Burnout is a psychological syndrome that involves prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. So we see emotional exhaustion, right? This is past compassion fatigue. This is where people start getting super cynical about what they're doing, who they are, where they're going, what their job is, and they're tremendously inefficient as people. So what's the difference? What is the true difference? Compassion fatigue versus burnout. Well, as I mentioned, compassion fatigue is typically highly treatable if we're honest, we're there. There's tons of support, tons of resources, tons of people out there that are ready to help, me being one of them. So it is highly treatable. Burnout is often much less treatable. We are past that point. Compassion fatigue is less predictable. My spouse and several of my colleagues were floored when I said to them, I'm at this place. Well, you put on a happy face every day. You seem fine. You seem okay. It's less predictable. But burnout, because typically these people are at that point of compassion fatigue or past, is somewhat predictable because you see the cards on the table. You see what's been happening because it emerges over time, whereas compassion fatigue can be sudden. There could just be a trigger, like I said, a euthanasia, a Mother's Day card from your child, a call from a parent, a random person from a neighbor saying you look tired all the time. It could be one trigger that all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm there. Because if we don't treat when we're there, burnout ends up sometimes requiring us to change our job. And I think the last point that any of us, especially because you've joined tonight, that any of us want to do is change our profession. So we've got to care for ourselves. And I want you to care for yourself because I didn't for a long time. And I so wish I would have, because I think I could have avoided 2 very difficult times in my life. So here are some starting points. One of them being that you're here right now. And again, I'm really proud of you for joining tonight, whether you're trying to just have great habits or this is maybe your first step. But AVMA has done a phenomenal job of creating well-being resources, especially promoting this one called the Professional Quality of Life Assessment. And again, screenshot, or I'm happy to send this to you. This was originally developed for human caregivers. So person and people, you'll see those in the slides. You want to replace that with patient and patients, again, to make sure it's veterinary based. But what you'll see in here are tools like this. There's 30 questions and it's a sliding scale. Things like I am happy. I'm preoccupied with more than one patient I help. I get satisfaction from being able to provide care for patients. And you'll go through these 30 questions and at the end you'll get a score. And those are based on these subcategories of what are considered basically the building blocks of well-being. Intellectual well-being, spiritual well-being, social and emotional well-being, physical well-being, financial well-being, and creative well-being. These are all subcategories that this well-being pro quality of life tool will help you sort of discern, well, my physical well-being, I'm doing amazing in, but my financial well-being is really poor right now. And I need to focus on that. It gives you a little bit of a flashlight into how you can help really focus where you want to spend your time. And that was developed by Beth Hudnall-Stamm, as well as some of her colleagues. If you look into resources for compassion fatigue, mental well-being for caregivers, and certainly within that same genre, Beth Hudnall-Stamm is really kind of the founding mother, so to speak, of really putting this into an actionable thought. And she put together the 10 things to do each day, which was inspired by COVID-19 frontline workers. And there's some related resources here in which to look. But I really wanted to share these with you because I think if you put this into a checklist or on your phone or make a laminated sheet on her first resource there, she has it in a downloadable form that you can carry with you in your pocket or your wallet, or put it in your car, wherever you're going to see it. I think it is so important for us to really look at this checklist every day, not just glance at it and say we're going to do it, but actually do it. And I want to challenge everyone tonight to find one thing you're going to start with tomorrow. It could be as simple as, I'm going to go to bed an hour earlier from now on. I don't care if my favorite show is on at 10:30. I don't care if that's the only time I say that I get to watch my Netflix. We're going to go to bed an hour early and turn off our phones. That is super hard for me to do, I admit. Super hard. I challenge myself to do that, and I am actively working on it. I struggle with getting enough sleep, and I think most of us do. But that could be one, and that's number one on her list. Number two is getting enough to eat. And it's not just getting enough, right? It's getting the right things. So maybe your step you're going to take is you're going to always have fruit and veggies at the office. Maybe you're going to try to make snack bags for your kids for camp, and you're going to take some of those. Maybe you're going to grab a protein shake instead of a Coke at lunch. Maybe it's just saying, I'm not going to get McDonald's on my way home, which is what I do. That was hard too. But getting enough and of the right things to eat. Number three, varying the work that you do. I think this is the step that has helped me the most. The beauty of our degree is that you have unlimited options, really, of what you can do with it. I've been a practicing equine veterinarian. I've been a small animal veterinarian. I am a teacher, lecturer. I'm a consultant. I mentor. I have done research projects. I have worked with industry. Vary it up. If you love writing, write a column for a magazine. If you love mentoring, join a mentoring group. If you love public speaking, join Toastmasters or reach out, and I'm happy to help you figure out where can you start to teach and share your knowledge. Maybe it's volunteerism, but vary what you do, because it is incredibly tiring and mentally and physically to do the exact same thing every day. And we are brilliant people. We have so many things we can do. 4, do some light exercise. Maybe it's just stretching when you get up. Maybe you're going to walk for 10 minutes on your quote unquote lunch break. Maybe you're going to sit in some yoga poses at the office, in your office. Maybe you're going to take the stairs a little more instead of an elevator. Maybe you're going to park your car at the very end of the parking lot instead of right in front of Mariano's or your grocery store. So you have to walk a little bit more. Maybe you're going to challenge yourself and a friend on your Fitbit. But whatever it is, do some light exercise, because we know what that does for our mental health too. 5, do something pleasurable. I never did this. I thought it was selfish to every day do that, because working moms just don't do that, right? We just don't have joy that we do for ourselves every day. Well, wrong. You need to do something pleasurable every day. Like for me, I do a couple things, but for me, my first thing is I get my Starbucks coffee and I take a quick walk, and that's my head clear. That is my first sip of coffee is one of my happy spots. And I do something for me that's pleasurable, that I like. I get the sun on my face, the breeze on my face. I get a little bit of steps in. I enjoy that coffee and I just clear my head. Take up a hobby, find that time, but do something for you. Do something that brings you joy. 6, focus on what you did well. This is where a gratitude journal can really come in handy. And it doesn't have to be a fancy one. It could just be a piece of paper that you keep on your nightstand and focus on what you did well. Because so often we are perfectionists, right? Most of us are. And we will do amazing things like saving a kitten from hypoglycemia, but then one little mistake and we'll focus on that for the next 6 weeks, right? I mean, I still think about a mistake I made. So I was my second year in practice. So that was 18 years ago. I can sit in my head, and if I get to a bad place, I'll go right to that mistake of an Addison's patient. And we do that, right? That's human nature, but we have to focus on what we did well, cases we did well, things we taught well, clients we communicated with well, people we mentored well, family members that we had patience for, all of that stuff. Write it down and read it. And then learn from your mistakes. You know, like I said, I've made a lot of them in my life. But we get back up, right? We don't just have spilled ice cream. We go get a new one. Or next time we know how it spills. Learn from your mistakes and realize that we're all in the same boat. We're all making the same ones, whether it's a medical error or a family error or a parenting error or a friend error. We acknowledge it, we ask forgiveness, and we forgive ourselves, and we learn. 8, share a private joke. I know so many of us have them. And I will share one right now with you. When I was in vet school, we had a flag football team, and people would sort of chuckle that I was on that football team. Number 1, because I was quite chunky. But number 2, I was probably the person in my class top 5 who studied the most. Things did not come very immediately easy to me. So I said, I'll join the flag football team and I'm going to be a running back because I ran track. So I started being a running back and it was my stress relief. I would just tear through people in all of the games. And one of my classmates started calling me Bulldog. And so we would be out on the field and all of a sudden he'd yell, Bulldog. That would be my cue to just start running right through everybody. And we ended up winning the whole university championship for flag football that year. But that has stuck with me that literally 15 years later, I could be walking in a convention with some of my friends. And all of a sudden I'll hear Bulldog really loud down the hallway. And while it's a little embarrassing because I have to explain the story, I have to tell you, it is the most heartwarming, fuzzy feeling to think back to that joyful moment and to know that's a private joke that we share, well, now with all of you, but that we share forever. We all have those, and that is a connection. So find those private jokes and those private stories and share them back and forth and relish in the humor. Number 9, pray, meditate, relax, all of the above, whatever is going to feel good to you. I think it's incredibly important to find that pause, that quiet space within yourself and to take that moment to recharge. And again, meditation, I think, is very challenging for some people. It may be something where you just deep breathe, or maybe it's a spiritual connection, but finding even 5 minutes to have that pause is very important. And as I said at the beginning, number 10, we have to support each other. We cannot bring each other down. We just can't anymore. We need to support each other, support our team. Think about those cognitive and emotional and physical behavioral signs I mentioned about compassion fatigue. Maybe it's not you tonight. Maybe it's your colleague at work. Maybe it's your lead tech. Maybe it's your CSR manager. Maybe it's your practice manager. Maybe you're seeing these signs in someone else and you didn't know what it was. And now you can come to them and get them help. We just need to support each other. What we need to avoid is this. We cannot blame others. Compassion fatigue is our own burden. Nobody else caused it per se. And we're not going to blame other people. We're going to take and acknowledge that we might be at that place, and we're going to get resources for help. Impulsivity, getting a new job, buying a new car, getting a divorce, having an affair, shaving off all your hair, piercing and tattooing all over your body, whatever it is that is an impulsive response we want to try to avoid. Believe me, I have done that with my hair many, many times, of which I regret. Creating a habit of complaining with colleagues. Again, maybe it's not you, maybe you're recognizing this in your workspace. That creates a very toxic work culture and can certainly spread like wildfire to other people who are trying to have a positive outlook. The answer in compassion fatigue is not to work more, it is to work less. So you need to have a very honest and firm conversation with your team if you are in this space, and tell them we need to find some solutions so I can recharge. As I mentioned, self-medicating is not recommended, of course, at this point, and neglecting your own needs for others. Because if anything from tonight, if you take anything, this has to be about you, about taking care of you, making yourself a priority, a very, very top priority in your life. Because if we are not healthy, we cannot be healthy for others. So I want to just spend a little bit of time in the moments we have left, and then certainly open up to Jessica for questions or comments about focusing our empathy. And I think this is a newer thought, because there are psychologists out there, many of them actually, that talk about turning your empathy off. And I think a lot of people in our space would be like, what? Turning my feelings off? First of all, I don't even think that's possible. And secondly, how can we be good veterinary professionals if we're not empathetic? Well, let me explain. This is not denial. This is not saying I can't be empathetic anymore. This is a coping strategy of turning your feelings to work mode when you're working, and then turning your feelings to off duty when you're not. So let me explain a little bit more about this. Okay. Switching between work and off work. We want to make this a conscious process. So I put this coffee up here because that's my switch. That is my on for the day. I talk to myself. I kind of clear my head. I think about my day. I kind of reflect on, what do I need to kind of get through this day? And I have that ritual. My ritual is holding my venti vanilla latte blonde in my right hand and taking that first sip and doing my walk. And it is a ritual that I feel weird if I don't do. And it helps me change to my work mode. We breathe slowly and deeply. And a lot of times what people suggest is having an image. For me, it's coffee. But whatever it might be for you, it's this, I'm in work mode. It's a safe, protected space of which I know my feelings are on, and I know they are needed, right? But then when we switch to off work, what we want to do is take that image and shift it. So this is my daughter in Michigan watching the sunsets, probably my most favorite place to be. It is truly my peace. And I often will look at this picture and say, I'm not working anymore. I'm going to connect and care for the people in my world that are priority. And that may mean that we have to do readjustments to answering client emails at 11 o'clock at night, or taking 17 on-call shifts a month, or, filling a prescription, super, super late at night. Whatever it is, it is protection. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because that is how we recharge. That is how we protect ourselves in one way from having compassion stress and compassion fatigue. So think about it for yourself. Think about what could your images be that help you shift gears. For me, it's coffee and the sunset. Think about what those could be and put them on your phone. Put them in your car, put them in your office, wherever it needs to be for you to trigger. But this is what I do. And I take deep breaths and I shift. This did not come easy, I have to tell you. This is something you got to work at, but it will with time. I just want to quickly show that there is a book coming out that is out already, published in Spain. So unfortunately, it is all in Spanish currently. But Stress, Compassion, Fatigue, and Burnout Handling in Veterinary Practice. It will be translated to English and is coming out on Amazon this year. So if you do want to do more reading on this, look for this book. It's had tremendously wonderful reviews and will hopefully become a staple for all of our profession. So in close, I hope that tonight you have really been true to yourself. I hope that you have kept your phone off. I hope that you have not answered questions from your kids and from people at the office. And I hope that you've just taken the time to work on you. Like I said, I have been in all of these places outside of burnout, thankfully, because I had people that came to my rescue in compassion fatigue places. So I just want to offer out my hand to you, my email and phone, completely confidential. If there is anything that I can do to help, if there are any resources I can provide, if you just need an ear to vent to or an email platform to vent to, if you need to be steered in a different direction, or you've got a colleague who's struggling, disclaimer, I am not a therapist, not a social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, but I'm a very resourceful person. And we are all in this together. So you are not alone. If there is anything that I can do to help, please feel free to reach out or call. I hope that this has been helpful for all of you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica for any questions or comments.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Marks. It seems like this was really resonating with all of the attendees just per the chat box. Everybody was very grateful for your insight. We do have a few questions coming in. The first one is, what did you do when you realized you had compassion fatigue, but were working as a head vet and could not just pack a bag for vacation?
Oh, that's such a great question, because I feel like a lot of us are either in that place or have been in that place. So my first time that I was there, I was an owner of a practice, but a minority owner. So I was low on the totem pole, and certainly not one where I could just say, I'm going to take 6 months off. The first thing I would say is we need to find your support system. So we need to figure out who at practice is your support system, who within your family, friends, whatever your personal support system is, so that we can have some really rational conversations to come up with possible solutions. Unfortunately, when you're at that place, sometimes it's really hard to see the light on the other side. It just seems hopeless and nothing seems like it's going to work. And a lot of times what we do end up saying is someone will offer a solution and you'll say, that's just not going to work. We're just quick to dismiss it and we throw it out. What we need to have are your support systems around you that can offer suggestions of ways that you can make this happen. So maybe it's, we can't go on a 2-week vacation to Hawaii right now, but we can take a long weekend and we're going to find a relief vet to cover for a day and a half. And I might close my practice 2 hours earlier so I can shift some schedules around. Or maybe it's talking to your other associates and saying, look, guys, I'm at a really hard point. And I need for us to think about, if you cover for me right now, I'm going to get healthier so I can cover for you later. You know, I'm not saying one strategy is better than the other, but I think the first step is talking to your support system and having a bit of a powwow. I did that myself. Is we had basically a coffee meeting, and I said, guys, I'm at a low and I cannot find how to get out of this hole and I need help. And that's a hard thing to admit, right? Because we are overachievers. We're perfectionists. We don't ask for help. We can do everything. But if you're at that point, it's okay. And so that's what I would suggest as a starting point, and making a list about some of those possible solutions so that you can talk to the matters that be who are helping to kind of fix that schedule. And maybe they can find one that they can compromise on.
Great, thank you. I also have a couple questions coming in. If you could restate the title and author of the book you recommend.
Sure. And it looks like, I think someone said in the chat that it was just maybe out. Yeah. Oh, hi, Robin. I didn't realize you were on. Robin Downing said the book is available now for delivery in July. So if you can see that, hopefully you can still see my screen. Stress, Compassion, Fatigue, and Burnout Handling in Veterinary Practice. And I think it's by Patricia Smith and Madrigal. But excellent book.
Great, thank you. The next question is, do you have any advice for someone who is feeling a little bit past just compassion fatigue?
Yes, I do. And the first thing I want to tell you is I'm proud of you for saying that, because that is a really hard thing to admit. When we are past compassion fatigue, you saw where that heads, right? It heads to burnout and it heads to that traumatic stress. So if you are at that point, the first thing I would recommend that you do is to let your support system know, because compassion fatigue and the steps beyond that are so impossible to battle alone. It is really, really hard because you are not at a point where coping strategies come easy and you're thinking in a rational like mind. So first, alert your support system so that they know they are on call to help. That's what support systems do, right? The second thing is I would strongly encourage you to find a therapist or a therapy group that you feel comfortable with so that they can also help you individually start putting together some strategies for support. And that is also very hard to do sometimes, to reach out and say, I need this kind of help. There is nothing wrong with it. I wish the stigma of therapy was completely gone. I have a child who struggles with mental health, and the stigma around that is unbelievably uncomfortable and alienating. If only therapy could be welcomed by everyone, I think our world would be a much better place. I would strongly encourage you to do so. And if you want to reach out to me personally or confidentially, I can certainly guide you through the steps I went to get back to a better place.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, I am burned out and struggling. What next steps do you recommend?
Well, I absolutely empathize. And again, just like our other colleague who just shared a question, I really want to commend you for acknowledging that, because that is the hardest and first step. Very similar to our colleague who just mentioned about the compassion fatigue, kind of feeling beyond that. The first thing, please alert your support system. Do not be alone. If you feel like you don't have a strong support system around you, please reach out to me so I can give you resources for support. Burnout is a very scary place to be, especially in our profession. And again, the first thing is please know you are not alone, but we don't want you to battle this alone. So reach out to your support system, make sure you're connecting with mental health resources, whether it's a therapist, social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever you are most comfortable with, communicating with peers. But most importantly, if you are at that point, please, if you feel comfortable, alert your team, your hospital team, your management, whatever steps you need to take there. You cannot be working in burnout. It is a very scary place. And so we need to help you find a strategy, a solution, a short-term plan for you to get help, because you are important, you are worth it. There will be another wellness exam tomorrow. We all have to remember that, right? We need to take care of ourselves. So please, again, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to be a resource for anyone who needs it, but get your support system on board, get some therapy on board, and figure out a short-term plan that you can take care of yourself.
Great, thank you. The next question is, can venting be useful without leading to blaming others and creating a habit of complaining?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's really in sort of what you feel venting is, right? I think there are ways to have discussions of constructive feedback in areas of opportunity, is what I guess I would say in a long-winded way, where we're maybe talking about how, and since this is fear-free, maybe 6 people are on your team are completely on board with low stress handling, and you have a 7th team member who refuses to be part of it. There are ways to, again, quote unquote, vent in a constructive way to show areas of opportunity for that team member. You know, why it's important because of the emotional health, what benefits are going to come from learning this technique and practicing low stress handling. There are ways to do that without it being toxic, right? Not like, can you believe Judy? She's awful. She shouldn't even be on this team. Ugh, I can't believe she's here today. Ugh. That's the negative venting that, you know, we hear, but becomes incredibly toxic, not just to the work culture, but also to you, because it becomes habitual, right? And that's where compassion stress and compassion fatigue live.
Great, thank you. The next question is, as someone finishing an associate's degree in animal science and looking to get my bachelor's to go on to hopefully get my DVM, family and friends often suggest that taking summer sessions off is setting me back from my goals, but is it really?
Oh, absolutely not. It is not setting you back. So this is what I would say. Your career will be here. I had 3 classmates in school with me who were in their 60s, who took decades off from anything that they learned related to animals and then came back. If you need that time away to recharge, if you need that time to satisfy that bucket list of traveling Europe, if you need that time to volunteer in the Peace Corps or whatever it is that's going to bring that joy to you, to fill your well, right? To fill it so you're not depleted, then do it. Then do it. There, you know, my youngest child is like the queen of like TGIF and OMG all the time. She's 7. And her latest is YOLO, mom. And at first I was like, what on earth is YOLO? But it's you only live once. So in the immortal words of Maddie Schneiderman, I would say YOLO. If that's what's going to help you, then you need to do it. The career will be here.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question is, as a client, how can I also help my veterinarian to not stress her any further when I'm at her office, often with my cat, or even just to show my absolute huge amount of gratitude for what she helps me with?
Oh my God, that is such a wonderful comment. You know, I think it's different for everyone, right? I think one of the things that universally many of us are struggling with clients right now is there have been so many first-time pet parents, as well as people using their pets as their emotional safety net through the pandemic, right? Where everything else was falling apart, but I've got my cat. And people are so emotionally connected that they have become impatient and they've lacked empathy for what we're going through, and have really been demanding, I think. And I would hesitate to think anyone would argue with me because I hear it everywhere I go, nationally. But what I would say is this, thank you goes a long way. You know, being patient if they're running late, telling them I'm grateful for you, writing a positive online review, even if it's nothing huge, right? It's not like it was a life-saving visit, but just, I'm so grateful that my veterinarian does this, right? A handwritten thank you note. Oh my gosh. I mean, those are probably the most touching for me because they're so rare these days, right? Buying a cup of coffee. I think the little details are what matter. And, just being a kind person, I think, I had a client one time who said the same thing to me and said, I feel so bad. There were 3-hour waits during our quarantine here, and people were grumpy about being outside and, complaining, and they were arguing with each other. It was just so grumpy. And this client, called me on the phone, and I, was running behind, and she said to me, Dr. Marks, she goes, I just have to tell you, you have made my life so much better because you keep my dog healthy. And at first I kind of blew it off, and I was like, okay, but we got to figure out when Murphy's vaccine's going to, how you get into your moments where you're just like, okay, I don't have time for it. And she stopped me and she said, no, I need you to hear this. You make my world better. And she just sat there for a minute and she said, I don't want you to tell me about vaccines. I just want you to know you make my life better. And I think sometimes those sort of pauses, right? Those just moments where you're forced to put that pat on your back. Sometimes it's just sort of like that light switch, right? That sort of just resets. It's like a circuit breaker. So you're kind of like, I am good at what I do. And I do help people, and I do make people's life better because I take care of their pets. Having those moments, if you can say that to your veterinarian, they seem very small, they go a long way.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our next question is, do you have any tips for dealing with workplace bullying? Many of us have gone to management, but nothing is changing.
Oh my God, I wish I could give you a hug. Okay, I'm going to say something that's pretty bold. It may not be well received, but I'm going to say this in the spirit of YOLO. If you work in a place where you're being bullied, and it's the same thing I've had to say to my son at school, and you have gone through the steps to address the bullying, and you have gone through the appropriate steps repeatedly, and nothing is changing, nothing is going to change. And I think it's time for you to look for a better work environment. Now, you may be yelling at me through the screen right now and saying, but this is my dream job, and this is where I wanted to be. And I, spent 3 years trying to get into this practice. It's not worth it, right? Bullying is so prevalent today, and it is destructive to your mental health. It's one thing if you're being bullied and you've told management, and management is actively working on solutions, right? It takes time. Bullying can't be erased and stopped in a day unless that person is completely removed from the environment permanently. Even so, there's consequences that linger there. That being said, I think if you've gone there and nothing's changing and you still want to be there, I would challenge you to watch this webinar again and see if any of these things are you right now. Because if they are, the bullying is part of that. And it's not a healthy place for you to be. So that doesn't mean you need to put in your resignation tomorrow, but I want you to really think about active steps on, I'm worth more than this. I am better than having to put up with bullying in my job every day. I'm not being allowed to be a good patient care. I'm not being allowed to be a good mentor and colleague. And I'm absolutely not being allowed to be the best me. So think about that. Talk to your support system. Make a list of pros and cons. Start looking around. There is a massive shortage of veterinarians coming and veterinary nurses already. The jobs are there. You are not chained and with a cannonball to your leg to this practice to feel this way forever. I know that sounds scary, and certainly it's not the impulsive thing I was talking about. This is a planned decision that you need to think about, but if they're not changing it, you need to change.
I love that. Thank you. The next question is, do you have any tips about setting boundaries with clients who can be a huge source of stress for a lot of us? I've been loving curbside, and I'm having anxiety about getting back to in-person appointments.
Yes, I feel you. Client boundaries I think is one of the communication soft skills that most of us struggle with, right? Because either we have clients that are time suckers, right? Who tell you, I had a client, absolutely love this dog and rest in peace, my sweet angel, but she literally had a journal of picture and word description of literally every bowel movement this dog took in 9 years. Literally every single day, every bowel movement, a picture, a Purina stool score, fecal scoring, and then also anything she wanted to add, like it was a little wetter, it was in the wrong place, literally to show me all the time, right? So there's boundaries there, right? I mean, that's not something I need to go through every single time that client comes in. I would assume you're also talking about unkind clients, right? Clients who are abusive, clients who are disrespectful, clients who are impatient and believe that their dog's torn toenail should be seen before the hit by car, and don't understand the concept of triage. I think there's a laundry list of clients that have emerged from the pandemic, or maybe have been heightened from the pandemic. This is what I would say. I think first things first is you need to get together with your hospital team and your management and set boundaries for your hospital. If this happens, we will not tolerate this. Things like clients swearing, clients being physical, clients that are repetitively disrespectful after being asked not to be, clients who are demeaning, whatever it is, so that everyone is aligned and on the same page. The thing is you want to know your management team has your back. Because it's one thing for you to have a boundary and to say, Mrs. Jones, we do not appreciate and we do not deserve to be talked to this way. This is the second time. I've already asked you once. I understand everyone can have a bad day, but we've let you know that that's not tolerated here. And my management team will be in contact with you for other options for care. That seems really drastic. Let me tell you, it works. But I don't want you to do that unless you have the backing of your entire team. Because the worst thing that could happen is you do that and your management team is not on the same page and does not support that action. And then you feel even worse, right? So I want you to talk to your team and say, this is an anxiety that I have now that we're starting to see patients again. We've all had some challenges with client interactions. I'd like to suggest that we're all on the same page so that we can support each other and get through this. And that really worked at our practice. And I think that even if every client from this point on is, rainbows and unicorns for you, I think the one thing that can come from that is you bond as a team, that everyone has each other's back and that you're there for each other, right? So it's a great just trial in that. And understanding, what is acceptable for a client to do and what is not acceptable for this practice.
Great, thank you. We will be moving on to the final two questions now. The second to last is, sadly, my residency pushed me past compassion fatigue to the point I never wanted to return to work. I feel like so many of my colleagues finish residency and are excited to be specialists. Am I alone in my experience? I'm trying to recover and enjoy the field again.
Oh, you are not alone. I had actually, not even going in through residency, I had 4 classmates who graduated with me and never practiced a day, just from vet school. You're not alone. And I think I would sort of go back to Mother Teresa's statement, where after a residency, which is exhausting in every way, shape, or form, and practicing on such a focused high level of specificity and, demand, essentially, maybe Mother Teresa's strategy is right for you. Maybe you're finished and you're going to take 6 months off and regroup and recharge and rethink and get yourself to the best place and then enter. Lord knows that there is a dramatic need for specialists right now, and the jobs will be there. I don't want you to feel pressure that if you don't go instantly into your specialty, that you're not going to be able to enter the workplace. That is absolutely not the case. If you can financially feel supported and can take that time, then follow Mother Teresa's recommendation. Recharge, reheal, reconnect with yourself and why you went into that residency in the first place. Tell specialty groups that you're interested. Certainly kind of put the lure out, so to speak. I love fishing, so I'll reference that. Put the lure out and kind of see who's biting and let them know this is my stipulation. I'm taking some time. I'm taking a bit of a personal sabbatical, and I cannot wait to join you in blank date. I think the practices that are wanting you understand where our profession is. And the worst thing you could do is enter when you are not in the right headspace, because so many people have left and never returned.
Great, thank you. And our final question is, I have been in my first semester of school for veterinary technician for almost 2 years. I work long hours. Both of my stepchildren came to live with us full time. We've had to deal with court proceedings and mediations pertaining to my stepdaughter. I'm so tired all of the time, and it's so difficult to focus on myself and my education, my dream, because I'm so focused on everything else around me and taking care of the kids. I'm afraid I will never achieve my goal. Do you have any advice? I want to get back into my education, but I'm really struggling.
Oh, well, let me hug you through this screen and tell you, we all feel your struggle there. It's very clear when you write how badly you want to pursue your dream, but yet you have so many responsibilities on your plate. I would offer up a few suggestions. One is reaching out again around you to people that you can lean on for small support. It sounds like there's some things that you can't get off your plate, right? With your stepchildren, and certainly the legal struggles that go with that, and probably the emotional and mental fatigue that takes within your family. But we also, again, remember those 10 steps. We can't forget about ourselves in this process. So perhaps there's a way for you to take less classes this semester or next semester so that you can do them well and still focus on your family. Perhaps there are ways that other people can help you with either childcare sharing or helping you, share with school in regards to study groups. There are other opportunities for online learning. Maybe this school is not the most flexible for your schedule. There are other opportunities for technician online learning that we can, research for you. You don't have to become a tech next year. I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but if it takes a year longer and you are in a good mental space, it takes a year longer. You'll still reach your dream. Sometimes we're dealt things that we had no idea we were going to be dealt, and it was the last thing we wanted to deal with, right? Legal mediations for stepchildren is probably not something that you chose, right, to have on your plate, but we have some things that we have to do. That doesn't mean, though, that you can let yourself kind of wither in that mix. So like I said, I am here to help you if there is anything I can do, but I absolutely would reach out around you to colleagues who are in school with you, to friends, family who might be able to help with some of the childcare, finding other opportunities for the kids to be involved in other activities that allow you to do maybe night classes or weekend work if it's online work. It's going to be a hard road. Certainly, I'm not going to lie about that. I think many of us have been down similar kind of overwhelming roads where we're on the way to our dream, but you can do it. We just need to take it a step at a time and really kind of find strategies that support you too.
You are so wonderful, Dr. Marks. Thank you so much for this webinar. And I know everybody that attended appreciates it as well. Thank you again, and thank you, Virox Animal Health, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar. You'll be able to find a recording of this webinar on fearfreepets.com within the next week. Thanks again, and have a great night.